Hello all. I have a new camera. I'm very excited, eager to try it out, but we're just going to jump into it. Last night, RT released an article. Bernie Sanders smashes GOP and Dems for supporting massive, unpaid-for military spending hike in withering op-ed. Democratic 2020 hopeful Bernie Sanders took no prisoners in a scathing op-ed aimed at America's extravagant military spending, arguing a new budget proposal only proves the hypocrisy of Congress and its corporate enablers, insisting on a government that represents all Americans and not merely a wealthy elite. The independent Vermont senator took to the pages of the Washington Post on Monday with an assault on the latest National Defense Authorization Act, a comprehensive military spending bill set for a vote in the Senate later this week. Instead of massive spending on a bloated military budget, tax breaks for billionaires, and huge subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, we need to invest in the working families of this country and protect the most vulnerable, Sanders said. The massive unpaid-for bill is just one obvious example of the hypocrisy of the deficit hawks in Congress and their corporate enablers. In addition to a $30 billion hike from last year's already gargantuan budget, the latest spending bill smuggles in a number of troubling provisions, including the Caesar bill, or Caesar bill, however you want to pronounce it, which threatens to slap a new round of sanctions on Syria, Iran, and Russia over alleged misdeeds in the Syrian civil war. While several measures aiming to restrain U.S. foreign policy featured in earlier versions of the NDAA, such as a provision barring U.S. aid to Saudi Arabia's lethal air war on Yemen, they were gutted from the act in committee, leaving only the most hawkish elements in place in the final iteration. And they have a tweet here. Bernie Sanders pens op-ed against Trump's military budget ahead of Senate vote. He has opposed all of Trump's military budgets, unlike numerous Democrats who have co-signed increases in spending for Pentagon and country's endless wars. And that's actually very true. Many corporate Democrats, they'll fight tooth and nail on this impeachment thing. But when it comes to voting with Trump for an infinite military budget, they're like, oh yeah, sure, here's a few $100 million. Here's millions of dollars. Go use it. Go fight. Go use it to go kill people for the oil. Because we all want the oil. Just don't say that part out loud. Stop saying that part out loud, Trump. Stop saying it. But here's a few $1 million. Go do what you want with it. They'll do that. They have no problem doing that. But it continues. A hard look at America's endless wars is long overdue, Sanders said, slamming the enormous proposed budget of $738 billion, which now dwarfs several of the next largest military spenders put together. Few of the deficit hawks are asking if it is fiscally prudent to be spending more on defense than the next 10 countries combined, more than half of our nation's discretionary budget. And I do like this little tweet they have here. Oh, how are they going to pay for it? Oh, never mind, it's just weapons. Forgot we only ask that question when it's education or healthcare spending. Matt Schmaltz. And it continues. The senator also challenged fellow lawmakers in both major parties who frequently ask how he will fund his sweeping proposals in the areas of healthcare, housing, and education, noting that the same representatives seldom express such concerns when approving wasteful military budgets year after year. I find it ironic when I propose legislation to address the many unmet needs of workers, the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor. We are invariably asked, how will we pay for it? Yet we rarely hear that question with regard to huge increases in military spending. Now, most of this article, all of that article at this point is perfectly fine. It's good, you know. It points out it's pointing out the corruption in regards to the Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party. Now, all of that article is fine. All of that up until the end here. The end of this article kind of is a bit bothersome to me. Even for the self-avowed democratic socialist, however, some questions remain about his commitment to scaling back Washington's profligate spending habits, having already accepted more defense industry contributions than any other candidate in the current race. While some portion of that is explained by the support Sanders enjoys from rank-and-file employees of arms manufacturers, rank-and-file employees, let's keep that in mind, of arms manufacturers, which is counted in public records as support from the industry itself. The senator has come under fire for his support for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program, a poster child for military boondoggles, though the plane is expected to cost a total of $1.5 trillion over its lifespan, one of the most expensive systems in America's arsenal. Sanders has been hesitant to pull support from the project, which creates jobs in Vermont. That part is a little bit bothersome to me, because it's worded in a way that makes you consider, or it suggests that Bernie Sanders is going to ramp up the war effort. He's going to pour gasoline in the war machine. Bernie Sanders has been one of the most outspoken anti-war protesters for years, since before I was born. Since before Vietnam. And during Vietnam, he was a conscientious objector. The way that article ends makes it seem like, like there's malintent or like nefarious intentions behind his little speeches of peace. You know, he's against all these bloated military budgets. But you know, he supports this thing that you know, it brings jobs. Vermont is his constituency. So of course, if that is pumping money into that economy, that part of the world, if there's not many jobs to go around, if that can help with people there in Vermont, I don't blame him for doing that part. Bernie Sanders in the past has said a couple things regarding foreign policy, some things about Syria, some things about Russia that I haven't entirely agreed with. But nevertheless, I don't believe that Bernie Sanders is going to, when he becomes president, bloat the military budget even further. I don't believe that for a second. And it's not because I'm deluded or because I'm biased or because I'm taken by his charm or anti-charisma. I believe that because I strongly believe it. Because of everything he has done over the years to pass amendments to get people better wages. He fought Amazon to give people better wages. If you go to foreignpolicy.com, there are infographics Which Democratic candidates are national security employees given their opening their wallets for? Data shows that members of the State Department and the military are investing in candidates who are not currently topping national polls. Let's break this down, because that last bit in the RT article really upsets me. It suggests that Bernie Sanders, he's outspoken against war, but why is he accepting money from people in the military, in the industry? While former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren top most 2020 presidential Democratic primary polls, the candidates of choice for most national security employees are Senator Bernie Sanders and Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Foreign Policy examined how much money was donated to campaign committees from employees of the State Department. Employees. Keep that in mind. Of the State Department, the military, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Justice Department, drawing on data from the Center for Responsive Politics. When combining contribution amounts together, Sanders is the biggest beneficiary of national security support, followed by Buttigieg and Warren. Democratic frontrunner Biden and President Donald Trump trail behind those candidates, ranking no higher than third for any one department. The numbers reflect 2019 contributions received through September 30th. Donations from employees include those made by their spouses. Foreign Policy tallied data for candidates who were still running as of November 8th. And here we have with a graphic Bernie Sanders at 212,472. He's in first, of course, and Buttigieg second. And Tulsi happens to be pretty low on some of these graphics, which actually surprises me given the fact that she's a combat medic. She was in the military herself, but nevertheless, with the State Department, Buttigieg is also Buttigieg happens to be in first with the State Department in that graphic. So let's skip here to the military. Okay, let's skip to the military. Despite the presence of two veterans and an incumbent president in the race, no candidate has raised as much as Sanders in military contributions. I would never have guessed that. Sanders would have been way down my list of possible answers if this were a Final Jeopardy question. Larry Sabato, the director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics, wrote in an email. He's mainly about economic equality and Medicare for all. A Sanders campaign aide pointed to the senator's promises to end the endless wars and the many years he has spent on the Veterans Affairs Committee as reasons for his popularity with military employees. It shouldn't be a surprise that these things draw support from so many in the military. But Bernie is extremely proud to have it, the aide said. And here we have another graphic showing Bernie with the most military contributions. It includes the contributions from individuals in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force. The Coast Guard is grouped with the Department of Homeland Security. And if we look at the Department of Homeland Security, Buttigieg narrowly surpasses Sanders as the top recipient of campaign contributions from the Department of Homeland Security. Buttigieg has taken an unconventional stance on national security, writing in an essay for CNN that climate change is affecting everyone everywhere. It is the security challenge of our time, and a wall on our southern border won't stop it. He also promises on his website to increase federal resources to counter domestic terrorism and white supremacist violence. So here are the Department of Homeland Security contributions. Buttigieg in first, Bernie Sanders in second with $12,000. Let's stop for a minute here. Bernie Sanders only leads in some of these graphics. I'll put it up again. Because individuals in the military like him. We're not counting donations from the leadership or the war profiteers, the people who are actually earning the most from war. We're counting people who go home at night, scratch their balls, watch some TV, hear about Bernie Sanders, like him, and then want to give some money to him. We're not talking about the generals and their nice professional uniforms, their iron-pressed clothes, who walk into round-table meetings with world leaders and discuss what's best for the world. We're talking about people who just happen to work in these companies. Let's repeat what RT said. While some portion of that is explained by the support Sanders enjoys from rank-and-file employees of arms manufacturers, which is counted in public records as support from the industry itself. Rank-and-file employees. Like the RT article said, rank-and-file employees. We're talking about normal, everyday people, like you, like me. People who just happen to need a job and their technical expertise is in this field. So if they have that expertise, if they're hurting for a job, Sanders is going to help them with that. But he's not going to help continue endless war. He wants to give people health care. He wants to give people free college. He wants to end student loan and medical debt. The amount of money, he wants to end homelessness. He wants to end poverty. The amount of money it takes to end 5 things like that is not even a third of the amount of money that we have spent on the military in the past 5 years. We can end homelessness right now if we wanted to. We could give everybody health care right now if we wanted to. But we'd rather spend billions of dollars every year. We have over 100 military bases across the globe, costing upwards of $100 billion a year. Like $80 billion a year. Excuse me, I'm not sure if I have the numbers right. That much money a year to maintain. And it's disgusting. So if that RT article has you second-guessing Bernie, I want to show you a little video right now that I cut together. This is Bernie Sanders talking about his views on war. So,
to support the important amendment brought forth by Congressman Dellums and Congresswoman Waters. Sometimes I think that the people in this institution and in the White House are really losing contact and not knowing what's going on with the American people. In case you don't know, and you haven't seen the latest polls, the American people hold the President of the United States in contempt. They hold this institution in contempt. They hold the Republican Party in contempt. They hold the Democratic Party in contempt. They think that maybe, given all of the crises facing this country, it's about time that there was some bold leadership here and that this institution made some hard choices. And this is what the choice is about. We're spending $270 billion a year on the military, but we don't have a major enemy. I know it hurts your feelings. I know you're upset about it. I know you're hoping and praying that maybe we'll have another war. Maybe somebody will rise up. But it ain't happening. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. The Warsaw Pact is through. Who you worried about? Iraq? Panama? Who you worried about? I'll tell you who I'm worried about. I'm worried about the fact that our workers are seeing a decline in their standard of living. They want to see our industry be rebuilt. That's what they want to see. No more B-2 bombers, no more Star Wars. Let's make the quality products we need. Let's invest in American industry. No, I won't yield. The American people want to see our kids educated. They want a Head Start program. They want their kids to be able to go to college. They want to wipe out the fact that 5 million children in this country go to bed hungry. They want child care for their kids. They want decent education. Let's have the guts to give some leadership to this country. The Cold War's over. Let's reinvest in America. Let's support this amendment.
Time of the gentleman.
Gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from New Jersey for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I don't think any member of this body disagrees that Saddam Hussein is a tyrant, a murderer, and a man who has started 2 wars. He is clearly someone who cannot be trusted or believed. The question, Mr. Speaker, is not whether we like Saddam Hussein or not. The question is whether he represents an imminent threat to the American people and whether a unilateral American invasion of Iraq will do more harm than good. Mr. Speaker, the front page of the Washington Post today reported that all relevant U.S. intelligence agencies now say, despite what we have heard from the White House, that, quote, Saddam Hussein is unlikely to initiate a chemical or biological attack against the United States, end quote. Even more importantly, our intelligence agencies say that should Saddam conclude that a U.S.-led attack could no longer be deterred, he might, at that point, launch a chemical or biological counterattack. In other words, there is more danger of an attack on the United States if we launch a precipitous invasion. Mr. Speaker, in the brief time I have, let me give you 5 reasons why I'm opposed to giving the President a blank check to launch a unilateral invasion and occupation of Iraq, and why I will vote against this resolution. 1, I have not heard any estimates of how many young American men and women might die in such a war, or how many tens of thousands of women and children in Iraq might also be killed. As a caring nation, we should do everything we can to prevent the horrible suffering that a war will cause. War must be the last recourse in international relations, not the first. Second, I am deeply concerned about the precedent that a unilateral invasion of Iraq could establish in terms of international law and the role of the United Nations. If President Bush believes that the U.S. can go to war at any time against any nation, what moral or legal obligation could our government raise if another country chose to do the same thing? Third, the United States is now involved in a very difficult war against international terrorism, as we learned tragically on September 11th. We are opposed by Osama bin Laden and religious fanatics who are prepared to engage in a kind of warfare that we have never experienced before. I agree with Brent Scowcroft, Republican former National Security Advisor for President George Bush Sr., who stated, and I quote, an attack on Iraq at this time would seriously jeopardize, if not destroy, the global counterterrorist campaign we have undertaken, end quote. Fourth, at a time when this country has a $6 trillion national debt and a growing deficit, we should be clear that a war and a long-term American occupation of Iraq could be extremely expensive. Fifth, I am concerned about the problems of so-called unintended consequences. Who will govern Iraq when Saddam Hussein is removed? And what role will the U.S. play in an ensuing civil war that could develop in that country? Will moderate governments in the region who have large Islamic fundamentalist populations be overthrown and replaced by extremists? Will the bloody conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority be exacerbated? And these are just a few of the questions that remain unanswered. If a unilateral American invasion of Iraq is not the best approach, what should we do? In my view, the U.S. must work with the United Nations to make certain, within clearly defined timelines, that the UN inspectors are allowed to do their jobs. These inspectors should undertake an unfettered search for Iraqi weapons of mass destruction and destroy them when found pursuant to past UN resolutions. If Iraq resists inspection and elimination of stockpiled weapons, we should stand ready to assist the UN in enforcing compliance. I thank the gentleman.
Secretary Webb,
You served in Vietnam. You're a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. You served as a Marine in Vietnam. You're a decorated war hero. You eventually became Secretary of the Navy. During the Vietnam War, the man standing next to you, Senator Sanders, applied for status as a conscientious objector. Given his history, can he serve as a credible commander-in-chief?
Now, everybody makes their decisions, particularly when the time there is conscription. And as long as they go through the legal process that our country requires, I respect that. And it would be for the voters to decide, whether Senator Sanders or anyone else should be president. I will say this, coming from the position that I've come from a military family, with my brother a Marine, my son was a Marine in Iraq, I served as a Marine, spending 5 years in the Pentagon. I am very comfortable that I am the most qualified person standing up here today to be your commander-in-chief.
Senator Sanders, tell an American soldier who's watching right now tonight in Afghanistan why you can be commander-in-chief, given that you applied for conscientious objector status.
Let me applaud my good friend Jim Webb for his service to this country in so many ways. Jim and I, under Jim's leadership, as he indicated, passed the most significant veterans education bill in recent history. We followed suit with, a few years later, passing, under my leadership, the most significant veterans health care legislation in the modern history of this country. When I was a young man, I'm not a young man today. When I was a young man, I strongly opposed the war in Vietnam. Not the brave men like Jim who fought in that war, but the policy which got us involved in that war.
Is there any question that Bernie Sanders would continue these wasteful regime change wars? The answer is no. The answer is Bernie Sanders would put a stop to it, if not through executive order, by primarying the representatives of the country, of the 50 states, ones that do not go along with his agenda. He would go to their state. He would primary them. And that is how you play politics. That is how you get your agenda passed. If there are people that are going to roadblock you at every turn, you have to get the people on your side, and the people are on Bernie Sanders' side. They will put pressure on these politicians to do what Sanders wants, to end these wasteful regime change wars, to get Medicare for all implemented, to get rid of the unnecessary for-profit insurance companies, to change the country, to actually make America great. I want to love this country, but I am deeply disappointed in this country. Let me make it clear, I am deeply disappointed in the leaderships of this country. I am deeply disappointed in capitalism and how it has let so many people down. Is Bernie Sanders our best choice for president? You're goddamn guaranteed. That last clip was from 2015, October, I believe, during the debates, before Donald Trump was elected. Bernie Sanders has been the same way for over half of his life. Is there any question that he would stop with these pointless, bloated military budgets? Absolutely none.